So I've got both trucks, diesel and gasoline, one with the 7.3 and one with the 6.7. So I originally got rid of the diesel for the 7.3, daily drove the 7.3 for about 8 months and missed the diesel. I missed the diesel and ended up going back. So for me, why do I drive a diesel? How do I justify it? Is it worth the added maintenance, the added cost? That's going to be the topic of discussion for today's video. Alright, so as we embark on our journey today, we got quite a little bit of a drive, 40 minutes, and yeah. There's so much hype around the 7.3 liter V8 from Ford, the Godzilla. It's definitely a good engine. There's definitely a lot of pros, but it's still not there when it comes when it compared to the diesel. It's just not there. Why is that? The horsepower on the 7.3 is actually pretty close. Relatively close. The performance, honestly, as long as you're not racing, the way that it feels, it's going to be similar. Like, we tow an enclosed trailer, and the 7.3 does just fine. The 6.7 will kind of cause your load inside of the trailer to shift because the acceleration and torque is so much. The 7.3 is not really doing all that, but for all intents and purposes, the 7.3 is plenty adequate for that enclosed trailer that's weighing like 4,000 pounds empty, and loaded it probably weighs 7 or 8,000. Kind of a good combination. Diesel for that wouldn't be good. All the stopping and going and all that wouldn't be great for a diesel. But the thing about that is the outgoing 6.2 V8 was better than the 7.3. Why is that? The main benefit of the 7.3 is all the production cost. That's a benefit for Ford, not for the consumer. And the main benefit for the consumer is going to be the packaging. It's a lot easier to work on a 7.3 compared to a bigger engine. I mean, it's a push-rod engine, so it has a smaller footprint under the hood, and it's still a big engine, but you can just get your hands along the sides of it. They integrated the dual alternator. But the 6.2 was better. It ran a little smoother. It had the added spark plugs. It had 16 spark plugs instead of 8. What I've noticed about, going to an engine with 16 spark plugs versus 8 is it's a little more tolerant of the regular fuel. That being said, the 7.3 does have a bit more power and stuff. I would like to see, I think, what I would like to see on the 7.3 that would make it just superior to the 6.2 would be a dual injection system with a little bit more compression on the pistons. That, to me, would set it off, would set it apart. That, to me, that would have been better to have versus just the displacement being higher. But that being said, put the bigger displacement with the dual injection, and dang, you got a freaking... I think it's going to come down the road, but when it does come, it's going to just be the ace up forward sleeve that just best all other numbers. Like when the OEM can come out, when another OEM can come out on paper and beat that 7.3, that's when they're going to launch the dual injection, and no other manufacturer is going to be able to compete because they're going to have the largest displacement engine with the best fueling system available when it comes to power. I know there's reliability concerns and all that, but there's so many of these vehicles on the road with a dual injection that I think it's going to be just fine. Now, diesel versus the gas, I can tell you right now, the diesel is just better at driving long distances and driving far. You can drive a diesel across the country. You wouldn't want to do that with a gas. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can do. It can still be done. But it can be difficult, especially if you're towing, because the mileage is going to be, pretty bad. But there's going to be times where that gas engine is going to run out of fuel, or want to run out of fuel in between fuel stations in certain areas. It's just going to drink fuel and it's not going to have the range. Whereas this truck has incredible range. 48-gallon tank. Of course, this is an F450, so there's a lot of stuff on here that maybe is not standard with a diesel, but 48-gallon tank, freaking incredible range. We can go on vacation in the state and just stay inside the state. What's my buddy talking about here? Let's see if it wants to play out loud for me. Too late. Didn't click it fast enough. We could take a trip anywhere in the state, I think, and just fill up the truck and go. And that being said, I could buy like a 68-gallon tank for this truck, which I want to do down the road here, and really get some range. So when it comes to mods and stuff, the diesel is king, but just the fact that this engine, even in the form of an F450, can have just incredible range, incredible MPG, and just be something where if I'm going to be doing a ton of driving, I want to do it inside of a diesel. Now the fuel is going to cost a little bit more, kind of offset the savings, but this engine can idle incredibly efficient too, even though we all know we shouldn't idle we shouldn't idle our diesels, but you can idle it. You can high idle it, and if you had to power something, you got an inverter in your truck, maybe you got a 3,000 watt in there, you can run this thing all night long and it won't burn hardly any fuel. Going right. Let me go check and see what my buddy talking about. Hold 1 second. So here we are cruising about 75 miles an hour, and we're at just over 2,000 RPM. That's a question that I get a lot with this 450 being the way that it's geared, is what RPMs are you at when driving? So I kind of wish that gauge, I could just put it in terms of actual numbers and not just a gauge for the RPM, because I think we're at like 2250, but it's hard to tell. So with the 10 speed at around 80 miles an hour, 78, 80, I think we're at 2250. And with the 6 speed, that used to be around 2500 RPM at around 80 miles an hour with the 430 gear. But that does also mean a ton of fuel consumption at these high rates of speed. Gas or diesel, I think you could, at around 80, you fall to about like 12 miles to gallon. But the thing about the diesel is I could watch my speed. I don't know what the minimum speed is, probably 65. I could go 65 and I can get good MPG. Let's go ahead and look at the trip computer. I don't know, like sometimes when I'm traveling 65, right now it's saying we're getting 13.5 for the last 1,200 miles, 12.6 for the last 5,600 miles. So let's reset this one. That's only got 1,200 miles on it. Let's lock it up at, we'll reset it. We'll lock it in at 75 and see what happens. Because if I go 65, it kind of gets annoying with these other vehicles. but maybe I'll still do it. So 75 is a nice speed. We'll see what the truck can return, but when you really take this truck and drive it, say 2-3 hours, the mileage is just freaking good. Now the real-time MPG right now is like 18 at 75 miles an hour, and with this new high output, I do feel that the MPGs are just a little bit better than it used to be on the standard output. So it's creeping down to 17, but it all comes down to rates of speed. Like I said, we'll try a 65er and see how that kind of goes, but I let this happen for a little while. But a lot of people have been saying they like the interior. But as far as the diesel being better, the resale is better. The resale on the 450s is just king at the end of the day. Diesel 450 platform, very sought after truck, rare truck, hard to get the allocations to build them, so they end up being rare trucks. This truck cost $86,000, so I don't know if just the diesel alone is worth it for the resale. Maybe it is, but the cost is up front as well, and the resale and the gas ups. Oh, we got to scroll up some speed. So we're at like 18. It's like 18, 19 right now. It jumped to 19 because I slowed down a bit, but pretty decent little MPG that you can get out of this. Dare I try 65 miles an hour and see what happens? Let's try it. Like, it gets a little obnoxious because nobody goes that slow. So I don't know if the resale for just the diesel engine by itself is worth it. All right, so 65, let's reset it. Oh, sometimes I get a little confused by these buttons. So 65, let's go ahead and reset. Now you see cars are blowing by me. We'll reset it. So now we're kind of going slow, and people are going to be mad that I'm not flying. And I'll probably try to go to the right a little. Alright, so locked in at 65. So I don't know if the resale for the diesel by itself is worth it, but the 450, I can say that a 450 resale is probably going to be worth it. Especially if you go from new. You probably can get the same amount of money you paid for a 450, maybe more. But the diesel by itself, is that worth the resale? Well, the cost is up front too as well, so not really in my opinion, because the gas trucks have great resale as well compared to they're not as valuable as the diesel, but still pretty valuable. I think the diesels maybe lose a little more resale because there's so much history and stuff that when it comes to a diesel, where the gas engine is kind of like whatever, and people aren't as picky when they buy them. They just it's whatever. With the diesel, you kind of got to be picky and know the maintenance and what you've been doing, and so resale on a gas, I think, is maybe it's a little bit simpler of a transaction. So stepping down to 65 miles an hour, we are getting 21 miles to the gallon. This is a diesel. This is a 450 diesel. So how is that even possible? I think it comes down to this new fuel system that they have in here. The higher fuel pressures. They did something with the compression, different turbo, water cooling, all that stuff. It seems like